Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, episode 182. I'm Steve Smith, along with our guest, Sophia Patel.
Thanks for having me, Coach Steve.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. I've known Sophia a long, long time. Let's go back, even further back, when I didn't know her. I met her at age 11, 24 now, 24 years young. And Kerry Park.
Kerry Park.
Tell us your beginnings in tennis. We will skip the baby food.
My beginnings.
Where'd the passion come from? Where'd you get started in tennis?
So definitely started tennis because it was a sport that both boys and girls played. Like my brother could join me. My parents dropped me off, picked me up, and it was something easy. So I did swimming and gymnastics growing up with tennis for a while just because like it was neighborhood, that was easy. Gymnastics was something I liked. So I started at Kerry Tennis Park and like a few little like parks in the area, just wherever I could hit some balls and, wherever there was coaches around. But that was kind of my beginning around, I think, 8 or 9 when I started playing.
With Kerry Park, for our listeners overseas, right outside Raleigh, North Carolina, beautiful place. When you give us a visual on Kerry Park.
I think there's 30 courts. They made some pickleball, so I lost count a little bit, but it's 2 or 3 courts in a bank, and like one side of the facility is lifted a little bit, so obviously those courts are a little higher, and then there's lower courts, 2 or 3 courts, and there's just banks of probably rows of like 6 courts going in one direction, and then 10 or 11 courts in the other direction of the clubhouse, and it's just a beautiful facility and definitely nice for the families that live nearby.
And you live in walking distance, correct?
Yeah, just a mile. It's about almost over a mile walk.
With Kerry Park, Kevin King, excellent tennis player, he worked with Sean Ferreira when he was younger. And then he played some doubles with my son Connor, and that's where I met his father, Bill. And Bill, wanted me to call up Sean, and he knew that there was an opening, and I wasn't at that time interested. I should have been after I went there. I went, wow. We'll talk a little bit about Matt Clore. So when I first went there, I couldn't believe there's like a soccer field's not close by. There's an elementary school
across the street, and there's a high school right behind that we can hear the football games of.
And they could just walk from the. Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful tennis parks. And now they have covered courts, right?
They do. Yeah, actually, yeah. They have the covered courts. They're not fully indoor, but I think you can play matches in them, and it's all certified and checked. It checks out.
We're going to get into your connection with now your alma mater, UNC, but the Atlantic Coast Conference, one of the Power 5 conferences, they play there every spring. The conference. Yeah, beautiful place. So Matt Clore, he went and he was, I guess, the director of instruction or the lead coach for the academy. And then I went to run a 3-day workshop, and that's where I first met you at age 11.
Right.
But you were fortunate to start with Matt because by the time I met you, you were hitting the ball well. You had a solid base.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went up and I must have made 50 videos.
You made a lot of videos. There's a lot of kids there. That
would be a guess. But I met with, remember Patrick Gibson was part of the group. Actually, he's in a final today. It's a challenger final. What comes to your mind when you think of Patrick Gibson?
Definitely a friend that I grew up with. Like we spent a lot of days together because of Kerry Tennis Park, and him and Trice and Smith and all those kids. We were just hitting balls as much as we could, 4 or 6 hours a day almost.
With, I remember my last name being Smith with this gal, her first name was Smith. That's with, but Patrick, I went a day early, and I remember he was just watching practice. And I said, why aren't you hitting balls? And I think between his mother and his grandmother, he needed a day of rest. And I said, and this is what you do on a day of rest is you just come and watch practice. So that was, I think that for our listeners, and I think maybe I've mentioned this story before with Patrick, what passion. What are your recollections of when you first met Coach Matt?
I had worked with probably 3 or 4 coaches before Coach Matt. So they were all super different, different personalities. And Coach Matt was always, on the quieter side, I felt like. But when I worked with him for the first time, I realized how much I didn't know about tennis, and not just, the strategy in the court, but just the breakdown of how to hit a ball. Like, why is this ball going over the net? Breaking down the stuff that I felt like normally you would go to an academy. Like, they don't talk about how to step into a volley, or what's the direction that your shoulders should be facing, things like that. And me being I'm not like super analytical. It's kind of like, that's what I do now as a day-to-day job. Like, I'm an analyst, but definitely I had a curiosity. Like, the way I did schoolwork, the way I did a lot of day-to-day things, it was like I had a curiosity all the time. And I just thought, until meeting Matt, that those questions weren't really, answerable. There's not really a black and white, this is what you have to do. And I think there is still a lot of gray area, but Matt really helped me to answer a lot of those questions that in my head were like, all right, today, like, my serve's just flying out. What's going on? Like, how do we break this down? And he really helped me to understand that at a minute level. And that was something that I really liked. And that's why I stuck with Coach Matt.
The complexities, the politics. I mean, I know Cary Park, like any tennis facility with that many tennis courts, that many tennis coaches, different agendas, different egos, different compensation packages. So, but remember, there was obviously conflict.
Obviously, yes.
Conflict when someone comes in and say, okay, I think we need to ready the ship. And I remember Matt was using a trick that I had shared with him from Dennis Vandermeer. One group can do match play and simulated drills. Match play and simulated drills, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like in basketball, let's go scrimmage coach. And then long-term development, fact-based instruction for long-term development. And so the largest group was the people who didn't really want to work on strokes.
Right.
And then, we make the video and say, okay, watch it 3 times. And it's just not simple. I tell a lot of young people, fortunately for them, when they're shown their forehands and backhands in slow motion and narrated slow motion analysis, that may be the most difficult thing they've done in their young life is to change their strokes.
Yeah.
But then I ended up going up to Raleigh with Richard Hernandez. Had a group of Canadians that were thinking about building a subdivision and having a athletic facility or tennis facility in the middle. And there's certainly some ego. They had asked me to run a tennis smith school, and they asked me to pick a place out. And I picked out Raleigh, North Carolina. My parents had retired to Southern Pines right by Pinehurst, and I just knew it was a beautiful place. Why don't you give a shout out to Raleigh? I mean, that's your birthplace, right?
Yeah. So I was born actually right outside Chicago, but I grew up in Cary, Raleigh, the Triangle area. Grew up in Cary, which is a small town from Raleigh, but Raleigh's the next biggest town over. So we always spent like a lot of dinners there. There's a lot of good restaurants and activities. Like whenever you want to do something fun with your friends, like Raleigh was the place to do it. So Raleigh was beautiful. I loved Raleigh. That's where I spent a lot of my junior tennis career because of NC State being right there. So I trained there with Coach Matt, and that's kind of where I spent a lot of time. So I loved Raleigh.
With the triangle, maybe you have the answer. Research triangle for the longest time, and I have been called a jock before. I thought it was a triangle because of the 3 schools.
Oh yeah,
North Carolina State, and Duke. But the research triangle. You don't really feel like you're in a city when you're in Raleigh.
Yeah, you don't feel like. I mean, especially if you've been to a lot of cities before and you grew up in places like Chicago, Atlanta, New York City, it doesn't feel like a city. But as someone who grew up in Cary, that felt like the city for us.
Yeah, like when you just drive to the airport, it's almost like I wouldn't say as they say in Europe, it's in the forest, but it's lots and lots of trees.
Yeah.
Also, Matt, such a great tennis player, and so many. It was just. It's not simple to go into. I've heard it said to change a tennis culture is like turning a ocean liner on a dime. So for our listeners, and Matt's been a guest on the podcast, he's an excellent tennis player. And, so he could call the coaches up, which he knew anyway, at Duke or North Carolina State, and go over and play with their best players. And so then he went from Cary Park. So I know when I went up, you remember the name Rusty Backstrom?
I do, yeah.
So Rusty went up to help Matt. He's stringing rackets. He's right front and center. And just at that age, he's a young guy. He's maybe 18, 19. And the stringer's right there as people walk in. And you just openly say to a coach, the way you teach the forehand. And it's just not simple. And again, I think it's a fantastic facility, but any program is very difficult to get coaches on the same page, clicking together. We always say, can they agree that the court's a rectangle and water runs downhill? But Matt found himself at NC State.
Yeah.
And then because of the possible real estate development, I was asked to go to Raleigh and check out the tennis market. So I went and I helped the team as a volunteer. And we had a homeschool program. Why don't you share some recollections on that?
Oh my goodness. It feels like so long ago, but then again, like I think of moments and it's like that was yesterday. But I just remember being with like 4 or 5 kids, a little bit younger than me, some my age, working with Coach Matt and you, and you would bring in kids from out of country, out of state, just around the world. That was my strongest recollection, was just when you would bring in these groups of kids or siblings or just kids with their families that would come in and join us. And it was almost like, I feel like when you do that in another academy, it's like oil and water sometimes. But when you did it, it was like we were all kind of growing up with the same goals, like the same values. This is what's important to us. We're here to do one thing, like learn tennis, be good kids. And that was just kind of like my strongest recollection was like, we're looking forward, like who's going to be the next person that walks in here, joins us, does this. And just like growing that circle was just really, it was something that I really remember.
There's complications with rules. I think there's rules within a team. There's rules within a school, rules within a conference, rules within in the nation, say the NCAA or the ITA. But we had it set up where it was a 365-day camp, where we was within the rules. Just so many things. Michael Ogden comes to my mind. He just came, his father came out, they came on a recruiting trip and they watched a young player from Germany hitting volleys. And Matt and the head coach at that time, John Choboy, they were out recruiting. And, the dad said, well, my son doesn't volley like that. I said, well, he could. And, but I think it was a great mix for the juniors to be able to be around the college players. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was
a really unique experience for sure.
Sophia and I have known each other a long time, and everyone knows if you've known someone a long time, it just takes like 1 minute to catch up. I mean, I could just mention first names Beck, Robbie, and Austin. But I think it was excellent because in the summertime, the players are working really as a volunteer. They volunteer their time to. It's not. It's an optional practice.
They were there training too.
But as a junior, because we were just talking with a visiting parent from Michigan with his young son, is that I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's a fact that most parents and players haven't really seen college tennis.
Right.
So you at a very young age, you're on a college campus.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think that's the one thing that I was thankful that it might have happened by accident, but I think once my parents noticed the significance of it, is something that I would recommend to any junior player or family or parent of junior players, is that even if your goal is pro tennis, the dream should still be the step up or step down from that too. Like, college tennis is the goal, pro tennis is the dream. I also think that there's nothing wrong with, showcasing the fun, the excitement, the team camaraderie and aspect of tennis that happens in college, because that can be a good light at the end. And it might not be the very end of the tunnel, but light at the end of the tunnel for junior tennis, because that can get really long and gruesome. Like when you're in there and you're just traveling from one tournament to the next individually with just your parents or just your mom or just your dad or just your coach, that can get tiring and that can really lead to burnout if you don't look forward to something. And I think for me, it was like I looked forward, and yes, I spent time with the men's team at NC State, but I look forward to being on a team that was so much fun, so excited to see each other, so excited to train every day. Like my every day didn't look like that. So it was like something that I looked forward to doing.
Yeah, I think the term tennis is a lonely sport. It's a knockout sport. How's it go? Where a young player goes off with their parents, they go to a tournament, they lose, and they get in the car with their parents to go home. Where, say, somebody's playing little kid soccer, they lose and they go to Pizza Hut with their buddies.
It's a different vibe.
It's different animal. With the cast of characters, so many, you just mentioned names and tell stories, but this is where I become racial. The Indian grading system. Everyone's heard me say A is average, B is below average, C is can't have dinner, D is don't come home, and F is find a new family. With you homeschooling, that's not a simple decision for anyone, but so tell us about that. So, your parents making that decision, and then what your thoughts are on that, what you'd recommend.
Homeschooling was a journey for sure for our family, and not just me, but for my mom and dad, that was something that, for them was a big risk. They're getting calls from my nana nani, like my, grandparents in India, and then my grandparents that live in Chicago, my dad's side. It's like, what are you doing? Like, they're playing a sport, they're playing a game. You're kind of wrapped up in that, like, society. Yeah. Like, remember what we taught you. Remember, the roots that you grew up. Both my parents are immigrants, so both grew up in India. But it was kind of like that wake up call for my mom every time she would answer the phone, and it was like, people are asking you what you're doing, and her answer was, I don't really know, but like, this is what in this moment feels right and seems, like we can do this, we can digest this, let's just try it. And that turned into this. I mean, it was a whole journey that we learned so much in, and there's so many different avenues, especially now, but definitely, no risk, no reward type of deal.
I've definitely had some fun with, it's really directed towards the Asiatic students where, like recently, a gentleman from Korea, I said, well, a father, I said, well, what did your parents say? And he looked at me, he said, why are you asking me that? Because I know you asked them. I know it goes deep. It's a family discussion. But with the Indian students do just so well academically, but it comes down to respect. We have a gentleman here who's Indian with his young son, and told your father, who's here visiting as well, the story is that the father of this young player, his father said, don't you think you're being too tough on him? And I thought he had a great answer. Your father appreciated it as well. He said, I'm just going to use the same formula that you use for academics. Mm-hmm. And it really is. I mean, if you want to excel at academics, you want to excel at music, it's the same tennis, it's the same formula.
Right.
With homeschooling, it's just what it's called. They really think it's non-traditional scheduling. So you started young. What elementary school, 6th grade, 7th grade,
it was like
junior
6th
high?
grade. Yeah, 6th grade.
And did you, throughout your junior career, go back to take any classes at high school?
So my parents, kind of through middle school, we started this co-op program, which was unreal. It was kind of like this flex kind of style. And it was, I could go take, because some science courses, every course, I think there's an in-person aspect that is lost when you're, by yourself in your house doing it, or you're online doing it on your computer. My parents still wanted me to academically excel, not just get through, but excel. So they were kind of looking at options through this whole process, and they're like, okay, for right now, we'll start with homeschooling, online school, but then whenever there's one little sliver of you can go into a classroom and do this, we're going to take that opportunity. So we found this private school run through a church, and it was run by a woman who worked with homeschooling families and didn't necessarily do it just for sports, but there was really talented artists, there's really talented musicians, there's really talented just academic kids that were just academically excelling at a rate that public school would slow them down. So my mom was talked to the principal and was just this is our situation. Can you work with us? Is this something that'll fit our schedule, or would it not work? And she was like, oh no, absolutely. Like we get requests like this all the time. And um, it was run through a church. So we would go and it was like, they would offer courses throughout the week. So let's say like I have a tournament Monday. So I would take the Wednesday science class instead of the Monday science class. And I would go in and like there would be a lab format. It would just be like you're in a classroom with all these kids and they're doing the same thing you're doing, except for they're going to go do it, in an art studio, or, their Mondays look a little different than my Mondays, or they'll miss Wednesdays and they'll be able to make the weekend. So it's just kind of like a flex program that if you're trying to learn, there's people out there that can teach you. It's just a matter of how far are you willing to go? How many conversations are you willing to have? There's always a teacher for what you're trying to learn. And that's like something that I, through this journey of homeschooling and just life, has taught me that like, if you want to learn something, no one's stopping you. There's so many resources out there, and every day that goes by, there's going to be more and more teachers doing it. And it's just a matter of you wanting to do that. And my mom really, and dad have really helped me to learn that is like, if you want to do something a certain way, you're going to be able to get it done. It's just a matter of how hard you work to do it.
With, I know when we start talking about your experiences with the UNC team, we'll talk about, I guess we could start with your parents on opposites attract.
Yeah, definitely.
But change, it's not just changing forehands and backhands, but it becomes a change in lifestyle. But one, going back to the question I asked you, that I know some parents, once a child is going into their senior year, perhaps they've already signed, they're going to go off and play college tennis, they go back, so they are in the classroom. So you do have those options. If you're a taxpayer, you can go back to school anytime you want. With homeschooling, if you could do over again, I mean, I guess before I say that, or have you answer that with, there's no redo button anyway, but with, I know I shouldn't say a lot, players that go to college early, they're fast tracking, Patrick Gibson, I think an Austin Krajicek, a Matt Clore. It always takes more time. I think I know Austin and Matt. I don't recall asking Patrick if they could do over again, just take more time. But the one thing about time with homeschooling is that, say someone becomes very proficient at tennis and they go to regular school, it's a challenge for the coaches that everybody's on the court at 4:00, and maybe there's too many people on the court, but it's not just a group dynamic challenge; it's a challenge of different levels. So I think that's the reason to homeschooling, is that you certainly can have much more flexibility with your schedule when you practice. But you feel like you lost out. People hear about the social aspects. Sometimes people say, we're doing it to desocialize, to get away from.
Right. Well, I feel like I don't know what I don't know. So it's kind of like, it's a blessing and a curse, I think. I think going into college and then being surrounded at athletes at such a high level, they didn't really talk about that social side of high school that I feel like, if I was at a different college, maybe that didn't have the athletic caliber that Carolina had, I think maybe I would have felt that, because there is some, I have friends now that I like talk about, my high school life with, and they talk about their high school life. Oh my gosh, it's like different. It is just so different. And I don't even have that. I don't have that like FOMO about it anymore. But I think that if I had gone into college and I think if I was surrounded by more of the people that did the traditional high school route, I think I would have felt that like, oh, I missed out, or I didn't do this. I didn't go to prom. I didn't do, the high school football games. I think that might have, bothered me. But at this point today, I just feel like the experiences that I gathered and I cultivated throughout my junior career as an athlete and a student was, for me, in my head, a lot more valuable than what the other option was for me at that time. So I think everything's different for everyone. I already feel like an outgoing social person, so I don't think that I really lost out on, my skill set in that sense. But I mean, going out of the country, going to all these like fun places, I mean, I was still surrounded by kids my age just playing a sport. So I think I gained a lot of experiences that I would not have ever gained if I had done something a different way.
Well, I've heard it said where school is a child's workplace. But so if someone's all the way through elementary school, you're in 7th grade, you have a lot of experience being in school.
Right.
You know, I think that it's just totally changed where it used to be, you know, to keep up with the Joneses. I mean, from a competitive standpoint, we can get into that. A lot of tennis kids are homeschooling. They're playing twice a day, but they're not really training with too much intelligence. They're just banging balls. Just same thing over and over again. But it used to be where kids would play multiple sports, which I thought was great, being part of a team, and everybody played high school tennis.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everybody went to school, say from 8 to 3, got out, did their extracurricular activity, did their homework, and rinse and repeat, did it over and over again. I've heard it said if people were to be able to do it right the entire time, they could go to regular school. But you know, everyone's an individual, case by case study. If some let's go back to tennis. If people have to make changes in their game, you know, how are they going to do that? I think Waleed.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about just all these different players. He was so mature. Met his parents. We produced a video, and he was still in the 12 and unders. And next thing I know, of course, they had the means to do that. Next thing you know, they had an apartment, and he was there, you know, for 2 sessions a day, and he just changed his technical base so fast.
Yeah.
So that's where, you know, I think of Martina Hingis, Lindsay Davenport, and Venus Williams. They're all about the same age. They all became number 1 in the world, but there's a different way to get from point A to point B. How many of your I don't want to jump too far ahead, but at UNC, how many would you know, like say your teammates over the time you were there, how many of them were homeschoolers versus regular schoolers?
I think it would be about 60 homeschooling, 40% high school. But it might have been like, you know, it's also state to state. There's different rules. So like they could have gone to high school, but they were able to get out 3 hours early and, you know, train. So do I count that? I don't know. But definitely like they had that more of a high school experience than someone who fully homeschooled did. But probably 60, 40, you know.
The backstories, you know, do they have older siblings that played? Or was their father or mother a tennis coach? And, you know, how much tennis did they actually play? So yeah, one shoe doesn't fit all. Let's talk a little bit about change. I guess we could start with you have 2 brothers. Start with Ayaz's forehand.
Ayaz's forehand.
Now, the only reason I say that is that coming back to it, when I met you had already worked with Matt, and you had what I would say solid fundamentals. And he's very athletic. I would say EF on the brain typing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're that age, 11, 12, 13, and you have to make changes in your game. It's very, very difficult.
Right.
But they're all different sorts of changes. I think of Beck Bond. He wasn't in the lineup his junior year in college. Then I came in, and I did have to take the older players off the sides a little bit, go from G lingo to PG lingo or beyond. And, you know, his last year in the ACC lost 1 match. But it's all about change where, you know, getting out of bed in the morning and push-ups and sit-ups and any recollection or say a story that comes to you from the players that you met during that time at NC State?
You mean like just from like day-to-day stories or just?
Well, you know, not character assassination, but just in that, you know, not talking about people, but just turnaround stories, because I think they think our listeners, you know, it's amazing how many young players they've played 5 years and they find out they have a palm up serve, or they're playing 14s and they've never served and volleyed once, singles or doubles.
I think that, I mean, there's so many turnaround stories. Like I could even, like, you know, starting from a specific stroke or to the whole game or the way of thinking, you know. But one thing that does stand out to me is that, you know, we had an academy that was run by first Matt and then his brother Chris, who took over. And it was funny because I felt like that really shifted like the way that we, you know, worked from day to day. It was like Matt had a completely different style of coaching. They had the same message, but like, you know, different styles. So I think one of my most memorable turnaround, you know, kind of eye-opening moments was Chris always, would be like, look athletic, look athletic. Like, you guys just look like, you're out there and you're just going through the motions, like, look athletic. And like one day he came with these mattresses and we were like, what the heck is going on? Like, and like,
Oh, I remember that.
and like, and we had probably like 8 or 9 kids, a lot of girls at the time, boys, like, and we're always, we really focused on fundamentals and technique, but we also like, mixed in match play and all that. But he just had this issue where we would work on technique and then we couldn't, snap out of it. We couldn't be like, all right, it's game time, let's do this, So we walked in at 8 a.m. I just remember seeing mattresses slid up against the net and I was like, oh my goodness, like what could possibly be happening right now? And like the guys are just kind of talking, the boys, not the guys, boys and girls were just kind of talking about what's going on. He walks out of his office and he's like, we're working on diving volleys. And I was like, what the heck are we doing? And then he was like, no, if you guys, now you don't have a choice. You guys have to look athletic or else, you're going to face plant. So, and so I think for literally our 2-hour practice, there's some videos in my phone, I'm sure, but it was like 8 or 9 of us. We got in a line like we would normally volley, except for our line was on that ad side in the doubles alley. Run in, split step, get a regular volley, and then diving volley. Like I don't know when I've ever dived for a volley since then or before that, but we did that for 2 hours. I just remember throwing myself onto the mattress. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I hope I don't break my shoulder. But it was probably one of the most fun practices we've ever had. Like Chris had so much fun. We had so much fun. And he's like, look athletic, look athletic. Like we didn't like all the like stuff like we talked about that whole month thrown out the window. We were just trying to get our racket on the ball. Like, that was just fun. And then that was like for me an experience that really woke me up and jolted me up. And it was like, okay, at the end of the day, it's true. Like I can overthink, I can, analyze this as much as I want, but at the end of the day, I got to look athletic or I won't be taken seriously. And I won't be, seen in the eyes of other people as an athlete.
That's such a fun story with the Clore brothers. Let me say this about Boris Becker won Wimbledon 85. There's a point where he dives twice for the same, he dives, but he has to dive again. It's the same ball and he makes the shot. And I remember going back and forth to Germany. There's a tennis boom. Graf and Becker, they're both number one. Vic Braden had set up tennis schools and, throughout, Germany. And, he had one in Switzerland and one in Spain, but it was primarily in Germany. It's, like 6, 7 different sites. And I went from one site to the next because I was training the coaches. And in traveling throughout Germany, there was mattresses at every place you went. And it was dive and roll. And, we've brought this up. We've talked to some Russian coaches on our podcast and with recovered Russian tennis. You go to Europe and I say you go to Moscow and one of the indoor courts is going to be set up with gymnastics equipment. But the Clore brothers, a homework assignment for our deep, people taking a deep dive into GreatBase. Go to YouTube, just type in Clore brothers, GreatBase Tennis. And it's like a circus act. I mean, these guys, the Russians, every young kid should start in gymnastics. I think it really is, you don't have to get into gymnastics to the point where, like at major universities, it's like, well, how often does the ambulance come to gymnastics practice? The girls doing the backflip on the balance beam, but just tumbling and rolling and body awareness. And I love that, looking like an athlete. But I always tease the Clore brothers. I mean, one's older than the other, but they look like identical twins. That's their mom, can you tell them apart? And they look so much alike, but I call one the good looking brother and one the better looking brother. But if you watch the Clore brothers with, it's interesting too. I tease and say, they should put Chris in charge of the USTA because, he'll get upset with players and he just like boom, instant hostility. And I think I shouldn't say all, I mean, successful parenting at times, successful coaching at times requires instant hostility. Where Matt, if Matt's missing, it's like he's upset with what some kids are doing. He goes for a run, he goes to hit the backboard because at NC State we had that hidden court. It's like I know where he is, when it comes to me with Chris was a young kid who was with us for a long time. People ask me about it all the time because there's a lot of video clips on Victor Lilov. And, under our watch, I mean, we'd say, okay, he did pretty well. He's number one in the country, won the Orange Bowl. What goes with that? The National 12s, the Orange Bowl, the La Petits. But Chris one time put a thing of tape over his mouth, and I said, that's a good idea, but I think we just poke a hole in it. And it's easier to get away with something like that with parents today if it's 3 or 4 coaches versus just one coach. I think a change. A change of scenery. Why don't you tell us a little about going to Germany?
Germany. So that was 2015, maybe 2016. I don't remember.
Actually, your dad was telling me. I think it was 2014.
Okay,
I'm not good at all with years.
Ago. Yeah. Incredible experience. Once in a lifetime for sure. But that was something. Like, I just remember having sleeping bags and air mattresses in the indoor courts, which were made of carpet. Am I right? I think they were made of carpet.
Carpet, yeah.
I'd never seen carpeted indoor courts, so that was different for me. And then I never played on red clay before that, so that was different. Being surrounded by foreigners, being surrounded by people in the state that I never met, just basically walked into a situation where the only familiar faces was really you, my brother, and Matt when he came for that, that week. And it was just something.
We took 25 kids from 9 countries, and we were there for 5 weeks. And I've done it here in the States. People kind of look at you cross-eyed when you first say, well, no, you'll stay at the tennis club. They'll sleep on an air mattress. You just need an air mattress, sleeping bag, no pillows. Pillows are for
snacks.
Pillows are for the soft. Yeah, the snack patrol.
Yeah, snack patrol was
the bad cop. Let's see who's eating candy. But it's coming back to the diving. A German kid diving on a red clay court or on carpet, a little different than an American diving on a hard court.
Yeah, it was definitely different. I mean, there was just a different, you could tell when, of the 20, 30 kids there that you could tell who was comfortable playing on those courts and who wasn't. And it was just you have 2 players, same level. One grew up playing at the club, one didn't, and you could tell in a second. And it was really cool. Would they win or lose? I don't know, but you can tell they grew up here. And that was really interesting. The way the club was set up, those kids were so intermingled, and they were just so excited to play a match. They were so excited to compete. They wanted to play Americans versus Germans. They wanted to do all that. And it was such a different level of competitiveness than I had ever seen growing up. And I mean, granted, I grew up in Cary, North Carolina, but still, I was around athletes. I was around tennis players who loved, they said they love to compete, but it was a different level of competition and drive. And, that was really fun. And it really helped me to understand the world of tennis more.
We can come back to that. For our listeners, Sophia is based in Charlotte now, but she came up to Wintergreen, up the mountain, with her father Munaf and her brother Ayaz, and I appreciate them being here in person because we're talking about ways to improve the GreatBase. Certainly, we could have done this podcast via telephone, but coming back, I was talking to your dad about sunrise to sunset. We can talk about that, but he said that was 10 years ago. I'm so impressed with your father. I guess you as well, and Ayaz. You have photos of. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have never. I mean, I don't like cell phones. I have just out of principle. I have never taken one photo with my phone.
What?
I have for the longest time. I didn't have it. My former wife and 2 sons had a phone. I didn't have a phone. I was going to be the last person to get one. I finally had to get one. Just had to have one. There's no phones anymore. People say, my son's at the airport. They're lost.
That reminds me of, so my assistant coach at Carolina, Ty Thompson, he didn't have a phone my freshman year. So he didn't text. He didn't believe in that.
I love that guy.
He didn't value that. It was just a waste of time, waste of, energy, whatever. But then we started missing individuals because he was emailing us, and that was how he was getting a hold of us. And we were a lot of us don't even have the Gmail app on our phone. We're just we'll check email at night on Fridays or whatever. We have class, whatever. And then we started missing, he's over there at the courts at 6:37 waiting for us. We had confirmed 3 days before, and all of a sudden it's hey, I'm out here, thanks, Ty, see you soon. And it's we were just and then I think Coach Ty, he caved a little bit. At the end of freshman year, he's guys, got a cell phone, don't take advantage of it.
No, you have to cave in. I mean, there's just no way to. Yeah. So I got to tell, I mean, I can remember borrowing one of my son's phones and being in a meeting, some business people, once I was at a bank, and I was there to serve as an advisor. I was always thinking about building a tennis club. And I did say before, I said, well, I have my son's phone, and if the phone goes off, I said, someone's going to have to help me because I don't even know how to turn it off. And it was a ringtone, and it was rap music started blaring. But for the longest time, I had a phone. I didn't text because you'd be at a tournament and the parents would be texting, "What's the score now?" Well, it was 1-1, but it's been a long game. Do sad. It's still 1-1. It's like, I used to say, I read my text messages after midnight. But it's amazing how much has changed. Coming back to the date, I don't remember exactly when Germany was, but I know it was a long time ago because I saw the photo with your brother Ayaz, and he's a tiny guy.
Yeah.
So it was, if he's 20 now, it was, you do the math on it. But no, your dad, we had this program, Sunrise to Sunset, to raise money for the club team at NC State. And it's just a tennis marathon. You go 1 hour at a time, but it's 40 minutes of light drills. And it's a great way to teach a lot of technique because you're going to be there sunrise to sunset. Ideally, a 10-hour day in November is good. You go 10 minutes of 40 minutes of instruction, 10 minutes of contests with prizes that people donate, and then 10 minutes of bagels and bananas that someone donates. And it's a fun way to raise money. That was part of our conversation on how to improve the GreatBase, is that should be done on a regular basis. Coming back to Germany, we didn't have that much exposure to the men's or women's team at that time because the Germans, they go on more vacations, I think, than anyone. So the David Squire's beautiful club in Dusseldorf, no one's there. So we have really access to the club.
Right.
It just opened up the club to us, and we had 3 meals right there on campus. But it was like, I think, just listening to you probably talk about it, the highlight might have been just walking around Dusseldorf and being able to have an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
like boot camp over there.
24 hours tennis. I can tell you a funny story about that campus. A boy that we worked with, he really improved. He was ranked, I think, 1 in his country in Germany, but he didn't stay the program. He didn't stay the course. And I remember just telling him, I said, we're going to put you on the middle court because if you're pulling over, you're horizontal on your backhand, and if you go horizontal on your backhand, the ball is going to go over the fence, and that's where the train's right there. And there was signs forbidden. You can't, verboten or whatever the German word is that you can't go other side where the train is. And I said, if you do it on your forehand side, then the ball goes in the cow pasture. You don't want to be walking in and out of the manure patches. So many things from that experience. But I can remember a player from Japan, Takeru.
Takeru, yeah.
And he played one of the club players. The club player just popped in, and they played one set. And, I think the guy was, like 37 years old. And Takeru won. Takeru was a good tennis player. He could really run and kept balls in play. And the German gentleman was so nice. He said, "Can I play him again?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "How long are you here for?" He said, 5 weeks. He goes, "I will come back here last week." He goes, "I'm going on vacation, but this vacation, my wife might be mad. I'm going to practice." And so he went on a vacation, and he comes back like the 5th week, and he played Takeru again. He took it to him. He beat Takeru straight sets. I think that's the red clay is a teacher in itself. Mm-hmm. I remember you played a young girl that you're coming in, you're volleying, hitting overheads, and your dad was there, and I said, "Okay, watch this." And I remember telling you that you couldn't come in; you just had to stay back. And Americans have to realize, and you can train on a hard court like you have a red clay court mentality. Just stay back, no winners, just keep balls in play, just heavy spin. You're not even you even do the drill. Mm-hmm. It's I don't want to play a pusher. To me, a pusher is a defensive specialist. A pusher is Nadal. A pusher is Borg. But it was a completely different match. You were capable of beating her quite easily, playing your full court game. But so let's go ahead where you're finishing up in juniors, and what about the college recruiting process?
Yeah, the college recruiting process. I talked to a lot of coaches. I think I visited because my parents did a good job of like mixing in, visits with tournaments. So we kind of started planning for that, and it was like it was something fun for us to do too. So like if I'd go to, like if I would go out Midwest, I would visit Northwestern, I would visit. So I did. Obviously, we got I think 5 official visits at the time, and I went on 13 college visits total. So like met with the coaches, saw the school. So I saw a lot of colleges, and we drove through a few, obviously, and so I probably saw more than that. But went on 13 visits, and my dad's ultimate point was like I didn't even know where to begin. I was ranked like 22 in the country. I was recruited heavily by just a lot of like, variant in level schools. So like it was just kind of like every time I would peel some layer of college recruiting, it was another layer there. It was like a little onion that was just like, and in that process, I was still playing tournaments, competing, training, doing school because I was studying for the SAT and all that stuff. So I was just, there's a lot. And I just remember sitting down with my parents at the kitchen table one day and being like, I don't know where to start. I need some help. I don't even know what I want. I don't know what, and my dad was like, well, we can visit these schools and we're going to make a list of things you don't want. And that was kind of where I began my search. And it was kind of counterintuitive because you're thinking, okay, whenever you ask a college, a young kid, you're like, what do you want? What do you want from the ice cream shop? What do you want from the, it's like their eyes are like huge. And it was just, that's how I felt. And so then my dad just went backwards and was like, okay, what do you not want? And I was like, not sure either. But every school I went to, I made a list of things. What did I not like? Instead of writing down things I liked, because thing is, every time I went on a visit, I could feel that like they were putting on a show. Like this was like, they're showcasing what they have, the best things. But then it's like in the corner of your head, you're thinking, okay, there's some things that I don't like about this. Let me figure out what those things are. So every time I visit a school, my dad loves spreadsheets. So I made like a spreadsheet of like things. Okay, I don't like this. I don't like this. I kind of like this, but I don't really understand this. So things like that. And it sounds picky, but it wasn't like I hated it. It was just that this is what I didn't like. And then I started realizing through that journey of making a list, I realized, okay, it seems like what I don't like, all the small schools have. So I was like, I think what I like is a bigger school. And I didn't realize that. And I was like, okay, you know what? This is what I have in common. Like, I liked that Northwestern feel. I liked the NC State feel. I liked that U of I feel. So we started realizing, okay, maybe it's the bigger schools that are attracting me. So we started visiting those. So
U of I, Illinois or Indiana?
Illinois. And so that kind of like helped me to decide, okay, I want to go to a big school. Now after that, there's still a bunch of big schools recruiting me, so I just had to narrow it down that way. And to me, and for me, it was really important that the girls got along and the coaches were nice. And that was kind of like kind, like, well-mannered. It wasn't like, I just don't do well with like the yelling and the abrasiveness. Like I grew up in that environment, but it wasn't like that's what I enjoyed and that's how I reciprocated, good tennis with. So I think in my head, I was like, okay, I need to go to a school where the practices are a little more, not laid back, like intense, but like not in the intense of yelling, screaming, doing this. So I would go drop into practices without telling coaches. So like it would be like if I visited U of I at the beginning of a tennis tournament, I would go on Monday and see if I can catch a practice because it's a public court, you can walk in, whatever. So that helped me to understand like what does a practice look like that they're not, putting on a show for. And that was really helpful. So I realized that. And then I kind of narrowed it down to obviously the offers I had, like Northwestern, Texas Tech, Furman, but it was a little too small, but I liked the area and the school was beautiful. So those were the big ones, Northwestern, Texas Tech, and the Ivy Leagues. I visited the Ivy Leagues, but I didn't really like the vibe of them. I didn't like I hate to say that I didn't like the girls. It wasn't that I didn't like the girls. I just didn't like their energy. I didn't like their enthusiasm when it came to tennis. I just felt like they were just really focused on academics and tennis was just something they did on the side. And that was just that's not how I felt about tennis. So I kind of canceled those. I visited Yale, Dartmouth, and Brown. And so I decided, okay, I don't want to go to those. So then I crossed those off the list. So it was kind of just came down to Texas Tech, Northwestern, and and U of I, University of Illinois. And they were constantly talking to me. And I remember receiving a handwritten letter after hard courts from the assistant coach at University of North Carolina. And I was like, in my head, I read it. It was such a well-written note. Like, it was just like, I love your doubles. I want you to come visit, all these things. And it was just like, I showed my parents and I was like, oh, like, I got this. And I mean, they thought it was a lot bigger deal than I thought, which in my head, like, has never happened before. Like, I always am the one, like, super excited about something, show my parents, and they're like, I don't know if this really, So that was definitely different for me. I was like, okay, why does this matter that much? Like, UNC is a number 1 in the country. I'm number 22. And I was always under the impression that, like, and I think it is still true, is that you kind of go to the school that you belong at in the sense of numbers too. So, like, let's say you're 22 in the country, you should probably go to a school between 15 and 30. That can be your range. So that's kind of how I dictated, like, what schools were interested in me, and I think it helps. Like, that helps to help you grow as a player and things. So, like, if you're a top 10 player, you can go to a top 10 school. And that's just in my head how it kind of, so I was like, okay, UNC being number 1 in the country, I was like, this is like a little pity card because I'm in state, whatever. And my dad was like, no, you need to send an email, 1, thanking them, 2, like, try to set up a call. If they took the time to write you a note, then you should probably take the time to meet with them. And it's right in our backyard. So I was like, okay, that's fine. That's easy. So I did that, and they set up a meeting immediately, which was, like, surprising again. I'm still talking to Illinois, Texas Tech, and Northwestern in this process. So I go and meet with coaches, and they're so nice. They give me the whole tour of, like, Carolina. I mean, it looked beautiful. I was just like, wow. Like, and growing up, like, I was the biggest fan of Carolina. Out of Duke and NC State, Carolina was my school. Like, that's the school that I supported. That's the school I wanted to go to. But in my head, if I wanted to play tennis, it wasn't an option for me. All of a sudden, after that, like, tour, I was like, if this is an option, like, I'm taking it. But, obviously, like, I talked to the coaches. We had a sit-down discussion after their practice, and he was like, you're number 3 on our list of recruits, and we have a scholarship that we want to offer you, but we are still going to offer it to 2 people before you. 1 person already, declined the offer, isn't coming. 2 people. So I'm in my head, like, there's a chance. Like, how is this even possible? So I leave that visit, and I was like, I'll stay in contact. Like, so I emailed him after matches, after tournaments, and I'll just be like, hey, like, what's the update? And he was just giving me, like, hey, this person, he didn't tell me the people they were, but he would be like, X, Y, and Z is visiting on this date, so we'll keep you updated. So that was exciting. I was like, felt like I was in the loop. I was still, in my head, I was like, I'm still, like, still actively getting recruited by all these 3 other schools. But I basically went to another visit. I think I had a visit at Yale that I canceled them out of my list because like, in my head I was done. Like, I didn't want to go to Ivy's, but I still visited because I had set up an official visit. So I remember being on my visit at Yale and getting a call from coach, and I was like, I can't answer this. Like, I'm on a tour, but I'm thinking in my head, like, this is the day after the girl was supposed to visit. So either this is a yes or a no that I can go to Carolina. So I remember calling him right before lunch with the Yale girls and being like, what's it? And he was like, we want to offer you this, like, the girl that we gave before, like, declined the offer or whatever. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is really happening. My parents are nowhere to be found because, like, I was having lunch with the girls. I was like, okay, can you give me, like, till end of day? I'm on another visit right now, but I can be there, like, first thing tomorrow morning. And I literally went, and it was the day that they had won, like, NCAA's men's basketball had won the championship. I think March 17th. I don't know exactly the date, but I just remember going to UNC, signing a piece of paper, and just verbally committing on the phone that night at Yale, and just being like, okay, I'm going. And that was it. And I had to, before I obviously, posted on social media and, like, told other I had to tell Texas Tech, Northwestern, and the University of Illinois and Furman, and then on the phone that, hey, like, you have an outstanding offer for me, that I just politely, like, respectfully want to be like, I took another offer, and I had to do that. Those were the hardest 4 phone calls in my life. Like, I genuinely didn't know how to even begin, because it's like they spend a lot of, resources, energy, time, and they committed to come watching me play. And it was just kind of like, it was really hard for me to have those phone calls. Even though I was so excited about Carolina, those were really some really hard phone calls to have. And honestly, like most of those coaches told me, like, you made the right decision, and like this is something that we're really excited for you about. And obviously, like, some had opinions and things to say, but others, like, were very supportive. But it was definitely those 4 phone calls were really hard.
With so many things, it is a show. It is a show, and rightfully so. They're, okay, this is our facility, this is our program, and they're putting out the red carpet. I think another thing to come back to is the schools that you're mentioning for parents listening and juniors.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, I think back in your day, it was more tennisrecruiting.net. Are you a blue chip, 5-star, 4-star, 3-star? That still exists. But you don't really hear that so much anymore. People used to be obsessed by that, but they're really obsessed by the UTR, especially because of the decibel point. You're a 10, you're an 11. It shouldn't be your, Dave Fish says it so well, it's not a rating. It is a ranking if you're a 10.92. Mm-hmm. But those are the invisible numbers. People really need to focus on the GPA and the SAT. If you don't have those numbers, there's almost 5,000 colleges. And if you don't have really high test scores, high grades, you're not going to go visit the Ivies. I don't know your coach, Brian Kalbas.
Yeah, Kalbas.
Obviously, I know so much about him by just having, he's been in the leadership role between, after he played at Notre Dame, he played with his brother. Not a big guy, so he played Division I tennis. Then he was at Notre Dame as a coach. Then he was at William and Mary, but he's been at UNC for a long time. We'll get into UNC, but he recruited a girl by the name of Megan Broderick. And if you go to our course, Tennis Intelligence Apply, you'll see her hit the ball. She hit the ball really well. She was top 10 in the country, but it was so refreshing. He said, she's number 3 on our list, and we only have 2 spots. So, all the coaches I talk to, you don't really hear that.
Yeah.
But tell us a story about picking up balls. That's a great story for, people, as far as work ethic on your recruiting trip.
Oh, yeah. So my first visit when he was, after I had received that letter and I set up a visit, he set up the visit during girls' practice. So we got to end the visit with like a sit-down discussion at the indoor courts, and the girls were playing, and I mean, there was just three courts. We always practice on the 3 courts on the left side of the facility when you walk in, and they had 3 baskets set up, and they were just, just hitting like a lot of balls that day, and it was just reps and reps and reps. And after practice was over, coach was obviously downstairs, talking to the girls, and I just went down there and I was like, just started picking up balls and helping them pick up and talk to some of the girls that were there, and it was fun, and it was just not even like I didn't even have a second thought. I was just like, okay, I'll just go help them pick up. And then on my second visit, when I came to sign, he said, I don't think I've ever had a recruit pick up tennis balls on their visit. And I was like, I even, 1, think he noticed, 2, noticed myself, and 3, I was just shocked, like, why aren't girls, picking up balls? Like, I feel like when there's a million balls out there and 7 or 6 girls practicing and 2 coaches, I mean, the least you could do is like help out with, you know what I mean? So that was kind of that was super crazy. And he always tells that story whenever he talks about my recruiting visit, because everyone has a special moment that, makes them who they are, or like something funny that happened or anything. But like, that's always the story he tells. And
it's a great story. Pick up all. I think it's a character character assessment. We teach people how to run like an athlete. The alignment of your arms and your legs, I should say, and run like you're an Olympian. And certainly met a few people over the years. It's time to pick up balls, and I got to go to the bathroom. I guess got to go to the bathroom. With your brother Ayaz, just in the last 48 hours, just amazed at his memory. And I go, no, you're making that up. I didn't say that. But I do it all the time, where maybe someone's on one court and they're playing a set, and somebody else is on a court and they're hitting tons of balls. And, okay, the set's over. It's like, everybody pick up balls. And, first time visitors will say, I didn't hit any of those balls. And it's like, wrong thing to say.
Yes. No.
Wrong. Put your head down and run. Your story is amazing. I think that your story could one day help you be a CEO of a company with your role with a team. But because of COVID, you were at UNC for 5 years. We always say days are long and decades are short. So you were there half a decade.
Yeah, it's crazy to think.
I'm going to be 70 at the end of the year. That's only 7 decades. If you look at it that way, it's like it's just 7. But tell us your progression. I mean, obviously you went in when we'll talk about your knowledge of brain typing, your knowledge of stroke production and strategy. But as a freshman, you went in and you didn't have a speaking part. I know I played college hockey. The freshmen weren't allowed to talk in the locker room. So what was your progression going in as a freshman? You're coming from and I'll say this about the homeschooling program. We did have a lot of visitors, but I remember one time it was like, poor Sophia, she's with all these young boys, and the most unmanageable animal of all is a teenage boy. And how's it go? Why did God ask Abraham to sacrifice his 12-year-old son? Because at 13 it wouldn't be a sacrifice. So I remember, from a fitness standpoint, I said, Sophia, what you need to do. And I remember a couple of guys go, can I go? I go, no. And you just would have you run on your own. Go get first thing in the morning, go run, come back. And then at the end of the day, go run. But there was a time where you were much older and it was like, it was a small program. Say there's 8 players. There's Sophia's like several years older and she's the only gal. And then when summer was over, there was a lot of times where the college players weren't around us. But go ahead and comment on your progression as a freshman.
Yeah, no, I just remember coming in as a freshman. I was scared. I think like a good word to describe that is like scared and uncomfortable. I was like, as much as the coaches wanted me there and, like thought I belonged there, I felt like, do I belong here? Like these girls are top 5 in the country. They came from just winning hardcourt nationals. Like, they came from playing the 4 Grand Slams juniors. Like I didn't have those experiences. And so I just felt like, did I fit in? Like, how do I fit in? How can I fit in? What can I do to be better? Like I remember having, oh my goodness. So when I was a freshman, I came in and obviously I work really hard. I practice. Like I was just struggling. Like I was struggling to keep up with the intensity of the girls. Like it was like they were just hitting. And I grew up playing with boys, but boys hit heavier. Like they give you more time. Like there is a difference between playing a girl that's at a high level versus a boy at a high level. Like I grew up playing with boys. They hit a little heavier. Yeah, they take time away by coming forward, but like you're getting a different ball. They slice more. They mix it up. I was playing with girls and they are just hitting line drives in practice. And I was just thinking in my head, like, how am I supposed to get these balls back at a high level? So I'm practicing with girls that are top 10 in the country every single day. And I guess in that moment, I just felt like this is all coming at me at once. This is hard. I remember going in the locker room, just not saying a word, just like leaving and just being like, okay, I just need to get through day by day. It was like, just need to. And I was like, I remember sitting down with the coaches and I was like, coaches, like, I'm really struggling. Like I've never really struggled in that sense before. Like I've never really struggled in the sense of like hitting balls and staying competitive. And they were like, no, we recruited you because you're scrappy. You can get balls back. You're good at doubles. Like, you know how to slice. You can't hit that heavy ball. Like, that is why we recruited you. So you need to come out here and do that. And I was like, okay, but like, I'm going to get eaten up if I'm like slicing or if I knock up a heavy ball. Like, and they're like, none of our girls are going to come and take your ball out of the air. Don't worry about it. And so I just like, that like grew on me a little bit. I didn't really believe them. I was just like still going out there trying to bang balls with these girls that are a foot taller than me, hit harder, played bigger players, growing up. So that was hard. I had, a bit of an identity crisis. But my wake up call was when one of the juniors, not even the seniors, one of the juniors was like, hey, Soph, do you have a minute? Like, we just want to talk to you, or I just want to talk to you. Took me aside after practice one day and was like, hey, like, we don't appreciate you tanking. I was like, tanking? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I just remember I had just had a meeting with coaches like a week or two before that telling them I'm working too hard, like, and I still can't keep up. What do I do? So I'm in my head like, oh my goodness, I'm about to be kicked off this team. Like, the girls are clearly talking about me and not great things. And it's been chalked up to Sophia's tanking is like my worst nightmare because I'm like, this is the hardest I've ever worked So for me to be like, under this umbrella of not trying enough, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's it. This is it for me. Like, so I remember coming to practice the next day, like eyes were swollen from crying because I was like, I don't want to go to practice. Like, I can't go to practice because like can't work any harder than this. So I remember coach noticed and he was like, he took me aside. He's like, what's going on? I was like, the girls think I'm tanking. And he was like, you're not tanking. I know you're not tanking, And I was like, doesn't matter. Like there's 9, 10 girls around me that think I'm not trying and I don't know how to do that. And he was like, well, maybe Sophie's like, use this opportunity to play your game. Play like the way that you want to play. And I promise you it won't come off as tanking. So, oh my goodness. I was like, he's like, we're going to play points soon. Like, this is going to be a point play practice. So go out there, get every ball back. Don't let any ball go by you. I don't care if you're 10 feet behind the baseline. If you need to hit like all second serves to get that serve in, do it. You're going to slice as much as you can. You're going to like hit heavy, like hit as heavy as you can. I think my life changed that day. Like it was like, I believe that was my sophomore year, first semester fall. And there was like, I remember that practice vividly. I don't really remember like what month. I think it was September. But oh my gosh, I was beating the girls. I was like, what the heck? I was like, these girls, I mean, they were mad. They were mad at themselves. They were just like, what's going on? And, kind of upsets me that it took one of the juniors to come to me and be like, hey, why aren't you trying at practice? Like, what's going on? Is there anything we can help you with type of, conversation? But that was eye-opening. And it does make me upset that she probably thinks that's the reason that it is. But like, I just, that wasn't in my head. That wasn't, like that conversation was the reason that I turned it around, but it wasn't the reason that I play a certain way. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So like, I think in her head, she was like, oh, well, now Soph's like, slicing and lobbing or whatever. That's just how I would play. Like, that's like, I was always dicing. I was always changing pace. Like, I didn't have a big first serve, so I would hit kick serves. Like, coach was like, kick serve, come in, like, play like the girl that we recruited. Don't play like the girl that's trying to keep up. And I was like, okay. And that's when it kind of like, I had a wake up moment. And, definitely changed the way I like competed, the way I carried myself. And I remember that moment like super vividly.
With, from the get-go though, I remember Brian Kalbas, talking to us about a recruit and being so honest, but he was honest from the get-go saying we recruited you for doubles.
Yeah.
And wasn't there a time early where you were put in the lineup and you said, Coach, I need more time. I'm not ready. Wasn't that early on?
Yeah, that was around that time when he was kind of like putting me into the mix, and I just felt like I was letting the team down, like left and right. I was like, this is not it. This is not enjoyable. I was like, I think I need more time. And granted, I didn't play a lot of like matches, like, throughout my like college career. It's not like I had like, 100 wins or even 100 matches. I had like probably like 20, 30. Which is like not a lot. So for being somewhere 5 years, in hindsight, I am a little disappointed that I felt like, okay, if he had recruited me for doubles, I played a certain way. I wasted a year trying to fit in, and I wish I hadn't done that because I think it set my tennis back. Because imagine playing not the way you like to play, playing a different way. I mean, like I'm 5'1". I never was a big hitter, and I spent a year throwing my shoulder out on a serve. I spent a year trying to like hit line drives. I set myself back a lot and my confidence back a lot. And so that was a mistake. Like I wish that there was a little person like in my head that was like, you can beat these girls. Like you did beat these girls. You had moments in juniors where like you played top girls and you beat them, not conventionally, but you beat them. So like, that's how I wish that I had come into college, because I think it would have helped me to set me up to be a better competitor for Carolina.
This would have helped out. I would like to state that if critics of the GreatBase, I would be the biggest critic of the GreatBase. And one thing is, society, to me, it was so much better years ago where kids would take a private lesson and they'd hit with anybody and everybody. And in that small academy we had at NC State, because kids get programmed out. They don't play that many sets. They're going to their practice every day. And you would have been practicing for a long time with people who were being taught the same way you were. And if you go out and you play, so if you're training with people, our players are not going to, if they're well schooled, they're not going to change the direction of the ball from the neutral defense or the red zone. It's a high contact point. They're not going to rip it up the line. Right. And So I'm sure that put you on your heels a little bit. There's all of a sudden you're playing.
But hindsight's always 20/20, and I feel like, like the reason I could slice and I did know how to volley, and I did know how to tweak things in my game when things were going wrong, was because of those experiences through the GreatBase and through training a certain way. So I think there's give or take, and I think hindsight's always 20/20. But definitely wish that I had spent more time with girls at that level before college, because it would have helped me to be more equipped to handle that and just understand that there's different ways. Like, we just had a team of 9 big hitters, but there was one that wasn't, and that's okay. And that's kind of like where I struggled a little bit.
But the junior, not the junior tennis player, but the junior in college, your teammate, they just presented a problem, and they didn't present a solution.
No, they presented a big problem apparently, and so.
But then it was the coach who sat you down and helped you through it.
Yeah.
With, for the longest time, I thought UNC, they're number one. The 7. I obviously looked it up. Now I know facts. 7 indoor titles. I just assumed that. I mean, I didn't know that UNC had not won a national championship. I just I would have guessed they've won 2 or 3 because they've been ranked 1 and they're always in the news. And I didn't know that was the monkey on the back. When did you start to communicate with the coaches about the team itself?
I think that it kind of going into my 5th year, like with our, because I had my senior year, obviously, and then with COVID, I got that 5th year. I think going into that year, I felt like, okay, time is ticking now. I don't know, for some reason, I didn't feel like it was ticking up until my 5th year, and I was like, oh, I only have 1 more year left, and I just, it just felt like time was ticking. Like, that's how it felt to me, and I was like, granted, coaches have years of coaching in front of them, but for me, it was like that moment was like, okay, this is it. Whatever I want to do and whatever I want to accomplish, and it was selfish. Like, I selfishly was like, I'm the only senior graduating, or the only 5th year graduating, so I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and that was kind of like how I felt like going into that year. But what I didn't realize was that, or what I guess I didn't notice, was that we've had captains in the past and we've had leaders on this team, and I didn't realize that I was going to be a captain or a leader. That's what I didn't realize. And that was when I was like, oh shoot, and people were looking at me, and it was like kind of this question of we'd have little things like, where are we going to eat? And everyone's like, I don't know, ask Soph, where are we going to eat? And I'm like, I'm not playing. Why is anyone looking at me? I'm not playing. I don't care where we eat dinner. And coach is like, yeah, just have Soph decide and we can go there. And so it kind of started with little things like that. It was like, okay, what are we wearing to practice for we have we had gym and we had to match in the gym. And everyone was kind of just we had a system where we would, designate, somebody would come up with the outfits for that week. So it's Tuesdays we wear, light blue and navy, and Mondays we wear all white, or so I'm just thinking, okay, I was kind of waiting around okay, when are we going to get these outfits, and the structure of when we wear them. And then someone texts me and it's like, hey, Soph, do you mind making the outfits? We don't really know who else to ask. And I'm like, I guess. So I just send a picture of what we're supposed to wear that week. And it was just all of a sudden though, little things turned into okay, I'm took a step back, and I'm I think I'm doing a lot of little things here and there. And it's okay, coach is looking at me, and it's the girls are looking at me, and it's okay, there's a lot of responsibility. So I kind of just wrote down, so I kind of a little stressed out. It was in probably October, we were all I think we got recognized either at a basketball game or a football game. And I was I wanted to wear all black, and that's kind of frowned upon at Carolina. It's you want to wear navy. And I was well, and we were getting recognized at a basketball game. And in my head, I was just I don't know if it was something where we had to I wanted to wear all black or whatever. So I was you know what? So I pitched it to coach, and I was hey, is this possible? Can we do this? And he was just he's let me think on it. And then I kind of just started becoming that small liaison between the girls and the coach. So it was if the girls wanted something that was small or big, whatever it was, they were we'll just have Soph ask, you know, like, so it was like, okay, we want to get to, you know, we wanted to go to dinner somewhere, and it was like, Soph will just ask. So I just started doing that, and it was just like kind of creating a bridge between the coaching staff and the girls. And granted, obviously coaches are super, they're super approachable. They're not hard to talk to at all. Like, nicest coaches, I would argue, in the country, like super sweet guys. And like, but it was just like became easier. It was like, okay, I'm comfortable. I've been here for 5 years. Like, if the freshmen are struggling with something and they don't know how to talk to coach about it, I'll just go talk to him. And they were totally comfortable with that. And that was kind of just the situation that started. So probably in the fall of that year, and coach, and through all this time, coach never said Soph is the captain or Soph is the leader. Like, that was the only thing that was like kind of uncomfortable. I was like, okay, I feel like I'm doing these things, so I don't think I'm overstepping, but coach never said anything. The girls never said anything. So we just kind of kept doing it that way.
With the little things turn into big things. Team chant, tell us a story about that.
Oh yeah, so that was actually fun. So we our coach is very superstitious. So he likes to get to the courts at a certain time. He likes to do warm up a certain way. He likes to, you know, have food delivered at a certain time when we go to away trips. And he likes, you know, we've been doing that same away huddle for like 18 plus years or something. I was like, oh my goodness, like that's absurd. So like, we had season started, and our first away match was at Auburn. And so we talked about, and coach always talked about, coach did like have a little bit of a flip switch. He was like, you know, we need to be fitter for Orlando, and we need to do things differently. If we want to win at that final site in Orlando, we need to do things differently. And I think that was the one common theme that like the girls knew that like, okay, things are going to change. We didn't know what, but we knew that things were going to change. And we also agreed like we need to be fit and we need to be healthy for nationals at Orlando. And that was our goal. So like, coach never talked about NCAAs. He never talked about winning. He never talked about Orlando. It was kind of this like shush like thing. It was like, well, we're going to take one match at a time. And I was like, so I remember like, you know, we had a discussion with the girls and the coaches and being like, I think it's okay if we talk about the final site. I think that's something that we can manifest. You know, it's something that we can create, and we can create a comfortability around it. So it's not this like scary thing at the end. It's like, you know what, let's talk about it every day, because that's a goal. Like, if you think it's a goal for us, we should talk about our goals. So that was something that we changed a little bit, was like talking about our goals. And like every match leading up to Orlando, we were like, how is this match going to help us at the final site in May, you know, or in that tournament? So that was a big change. But in Auburn, at that match, we met the night before like we normally do at the hotel. And some coach has a book that we read through the fall, and then each of us, starting with the freshmen, presents on a chapter that they choose. So that's what our night before the match consists of. So we'll read a book, and then the freshmen, it starts with the freshmen all the way up to the seniors. So the freshman was for Auburn. She was the first girl to, Reese was the first girl to, you know, present. And so she presented, she had an unbelievable, she's a really good artist. So she had an unbelievable, like, kind of like a theory that like matched really well with like art and the chapter we read. And it was just like a beautiful, like, she had well written, and she presented it. And so during that meeting, I was like, I talked to coach right after it, or either right after or right before it, I think. And I was like, hey coach, like, I think I'm going to pitch to the girls that we're going to change the huddle just for like a new beginning. Like, you're talking about all this change. Let's just start with something fun. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, he's like, I've been doing this for like, you know, like a lot of years. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe we'll keep it. We'll experiment, but maybe we'll keep it. But ultimately, are you okay with us changing it? And he was like, well, if you can provide why. And I was like, well, I think that we need something that's a little more intimidating. We need something that's a little bit more us. Like, we have 10 girls on this team, and most of them like can hit the crap out of the ball. So I'm like, but our huddle sounds like we're little girls that are scared. Like, why does it sound so, you know, quiet? And I was like, it's just kind of like, I remember going to away trips and being like, wow, I love like the Georgia huddle. I love the NC State huddle, or I love the, you know what I mean? Like, there are schools where you, like, those huddles like stuck out to you. And we're like, we want to have a huddle that people are like, wow, like that team looks scary. Like, that team looks, and he was like, I mean, that's a good point. He was like, and I told him that, I was like, I think you'll carry into doubles, because doubles is a sprint. It's 6 games. It's like, when we just got out chanted in the first 5 seconds, like, it does, I think, play a role in how we go out to that doubles match. So he was like, okay. And he was like very open, and he was like, that's fine. So we worked on a huddle, and we were like, we were like experimenting with it the night before at the hotel. We'd never done it before. And we're like, you know, we're trying all these things. And it was just like, oh, we have that Tar Heel chant that we did and we incorporated that. And it was just like, it just became a lot more dynamic, fun, and loud. And that was like what I think we needed. So I was like, guys, let's just test drive it against Auburn. And I think we played Auburn and Wisconsin this weekend. If we hate it, never have to do it again. We'll just go back to the way that we did it. And if we love it, we'll keep it. I think it's fun and we'll carry that into the rest of the season. Oh my gosh, it stuck like crazy. And it was like something that was like so fun. We so looked forward to like someone being in the middle and like screaming and yelling. I mean, it looked intimidating. Like we actually looked like the team that we were, which was number 1 in the country. Like we're going to do this. We're going to go out there and we're going to be scary. And that was the big thing for the huddle.
I would say we coaches are creatures of habit, but yeah, change comes to my mind with the beginning of a tennis match. You use the word intimidating. Craig Tiley was with us for a long time. He's at the University of Illinois, and the warm-up they had was really a spin-off of the Peter Burwash traveling show. I mean, I knew where Tiley learned, you know, the ideas. And obviously he transformed it slightly or differently, but it came from that. And my opinion would be that Craig Tiley was in the Big Ten, and then Ty Tucker, the Ohio State team, how they come out and how they warm up. My opinion would be that would have been a young Ty Tucker watching what Tiley did at Illinois. I mean, it was different, but yeah, you just come out and you make a statement.
Right.
But it's also, I think it's besides the diversion, was creative, and then it was belonged to the girls.
Right.
I mean, you did it together. With brain typing, let's go back and talk about your dad and your mom. You know, everyone becomes an individual. They are who they are, but you know, it has a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said for you know, what people get from their parents. And we have a concept called PPP, parental permission for pounding. And we could even sketch a cartoon, and, you know, it would be your father. He'd be first in line. I love that. Tell us, I mean, we do know with brain typing, we have had a segment or two on our podcast devoted just to that. On our website, Joel Trucker, just to those people listening to a podcast for the first time, the article that made it all the way to the cover of Tennis Magazine is on our website, and it's, you know, Joel Trucker and Vic Braden is really based off the Myers-Briggs, and then all the research that John Nienagel and now his son Jeremy have done. But with your father, what he does, I mean, I would recommend that you need both, like what you say, your mom and your dad, but what your father, what he would present to, if he was to advise a group of tennis parents, what would be some points that you think he would make? He could write a book. If my dad could present to a group of tennis parents, what's some advice? What advice would he give? I mean, in a lot of ways, with his work in the corporate world too is, you know, I don't, you know, he's not a Wall Street guy, but on Wall Street, a coconut's a coconut. If you're a coconut, you're a coconut. No, I think he would tell them that tennis is a microcosm of life. I think that would be like ultimately what he would say. And he would be like, the way that your kids act on the court is a direct reflection of not only you, but the way that they'll act in life. And you might think that that's dramatic or that's, you know, a little bit like exaggerated. But honestly, like after, you know, 12, 13, 14, 15 years of tennis, that's not an exaggeration. It is ultimately the truth. Like, obviously, like people have their moments and they have, you know, outliers and anomalies, but the way that kids acted on the court was a direct reflection of not only their parents, but the way that they were as beings outside of the court. Like outside of those lines, they were almost that same person. And it kind of tells you a lot about somebody, the way that they can carry themselves. Like, you know, when it's 3-all in the third, how are you acting? Are you energetic? Are you reserved? Are you outgoing? Are you frustrated? Are you angry? Like when things get tough in life, like, are you optimistic? Are you reserved? Are you, you know, are you seeking outside engagement? Are you not seeking outside? Like, you know, like I think it tells you a lot about who you are. And I think if my dad were to speak to parents of tennis players, he would tell them like, you know, making sure that you're cultivating an environment and
someone that you're proud of being like, that's my kid out there. That's something that like he would ultimately say is most important, is like, you want to be proud of the way your kid is acting, let alone playing is a different story. I think tennis is like, it's highs and lows, you know, like there can be bad days, there can be good days, but the way you carry yourself, the way, you know, you speak to people, the way you interact with parents, the way you interact with coaches, that is something that will follow you and haunt you if you don't, you know, take it seriously. And that's something that he would probably tell parents, is that, you know, what they do on the court may not seem like a big deal. And it's like, okay, you can leave this tournament and leave all that aside, but it shouldn't. It should be very important, the way they carry themselves. You know, that should be something that's not taken lightly. And if they're not acting in a way that you're proud of, you shouldn't let them act that way. And whatever length you need to go to make sure that happens should happen.
Wow, that's fantastic. What about your mom? What would she, is she,
my mom,
you'd have to nudge her a little bit. She wouldn't
I think
get in front of a group of tennis parents.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like my mom, I think their core beliefs and values are the same. I think she would agree. Like she's like, granted, my dad would pull me off the court and my mom would leave, but either way, they would not be proud of, like, you know, the way I'm acting. It's not like they're going to sit there and take it. But I do think that my mom would say the same thing, but she would also say that, like, you know, there's life lessons to be learned and you need to take the high road sometimes to learn them. And sometimes it's not about taking the shortcuts. It's not about going to the best coach in the country. It's not about going, you know, to those Florida academies. Sometimes it is about just like kind of being in the trenches, working on your game, doing the things that you need to do day to day. And like, she really values family and like, you know, who you are. Like you can kind of tell like the kids that were raised by coaches. It's like, they're a little bit like, you know, they're just a little bit out of touch of like talking to other parents, talking to kids, you know, like it just seems like, okay, they need to hang out with their family a little bit. Maybe they need to like have a mom and dad moment, or like, you know, so that I know there's different circumstances and stuff, but my mom really values like going to tournaments as a family and being there together. I mean, it was more reason for me to act a certain way because I knew like mom and dad are right there, you know, or I knew that my brother is playing in the tournament like next week. So it's like, okay, I don't want to embarrass him. You know, it's like, have you seen I as a sister out there? You know, like that's not. So I think that was big for us. It's like kind of keeping that. I think we got like NC Family of the Year or something like that. So it was like, that's important to my mom. And like, yeah, they were really busy, but they would come out to all the matches if they could.
My father used to say, don't leave the house, don't embarrass the family.
Exactly.
With the visiting parent, we were all sitting in a living room earlier, and a gentleman from Michigan with a 6-year-old asked your dad a question about parenting. And he said, it's not about winning and losing. And he just basically said that, you know, you're working on this in practice. He said several things, but you're working on this in practice. Why don't you do it when you play? You know, you go, I mean, just the way both your mom and dad, I know they watched me work for a long time because they're, you know, they're everything. They're chauffeur as well. They're picking up and dropping off because obviously you very young and couldn't drive. The brain typing, very quickly, extrovert or introvert. Next section is sensate, intuitive. The letter N is used because the letter I is always already used for introvert. Then you're a thinker, feeler, perceiver, judger. But you actually talk to the coaches. I guess we'll jump ahead where Dave Secker, who's been on the podcast a couple of times, and I think that you know he's been connected to the GreatBase, I would say 15 years. And this is really a story of counterintelligence, his intelligence and your intelligence from a tennis standpoint. But I was recently doing a workshop that he hosted at NC State. And he's the associate head coach under Simon Renshaw. And you trained in that building before David was there, but Simon had came in right before you left.
Right.
And David said, I asked you before we went on air, am I the only coach that ever called you Patel? And he's when it was referred to you by your last name, Patel. We would have loved to have her on our team. But he did, and he said so many positives about UNC. He goes, the family culture, they get it. Team, they get it. But he said she was a force. You know, I guess you could talk a little bit about brain typing, or for our listeners, you ended up being the captain, the lone captain, the MVP, and you know, I have, your dad sent this to me. It was when you were presented at I'm not sure you call it a team gathering, the banquet, but everybody's together and you make a presentation and made comments about so many things and a little bit about each player. So, but there's an article I have written here, then there's a press conference, and then there's a documentary. And it's just, it's amazing some of the things that your coach said. My glasses on here. This is about Sophia from one of her teammates wrote this. Her positive impact and ability to bring energy to the team every single day were felt by everyone around her, including the coaches. The reason our team was so successful this past season is because Sophia did off court, how she rallied this team together. Again, that's from the head coach. While juggling a full load of classes, she helped the coaches with donor relations, assisted with the media department, handled all scheduling for practice, meetings, conditioning. In her last year here, this is emotional. I mean, Sophia took on, I'll get this out. I am an F. Sophia took on more for this program than any player I've coached for 20 years. With the terms, impactful, legendary. No one has done more for any one of our teams. Forever indebted. Again, emotional. Team ambassador. And if we needed a rally, we're gonna. He didn't say Patel.
Yeah,
he's a nice guy. That you're the person to be called to lead the rally. But tell us. Let's go into the counterintelligence with you and Dave Secker in doubles. Your team lost conference. I mean, it is NC finals. I saw it online. I wasn't there in person, but then we have here. You brought this championship ring. But why don't you tell us a little bit about, why, what took place, what unfolded for such amazing accolades, compliments?
Well, first of all, I think that being on a team that was so talented, it was just that we were always the favorite to win. It was just a matter of doing it and like getting it done. So one, just being on a team with 9 girls that were just rockets, like on and off the courts, just like could, play any style, any way, against any style or any way, and just like, really make a statement on the court. Like that was just the big thing for the team to begin with. It's just that we had such a deep team, such a talented team. There was just a matter of doing what we needed to do to get it done and just, having fun while doing it. So I think for me, like the biggest goal that I just set for myself was like, I'm going to make it as easy as possible for these girls to play their best tennis. I mean, granted, I wasn't playing once season started and we were in the like depth of matches and stuff. Like my goal was to make it as easy as possible for the coaches to do their jobs and the girls to do theirs. So I guess that's how I looked at it, was like, I'm going to lead by example. I'm going to do what I can, because like there's only so many ways to give like on the court. Like the only thing I can give is my energy and my enthusiasm and my optimism and my positivity. That was just how I thought I could give. Like, can I, beat them? Probably not, especially when we get to like in the middle of season. It's like I can't really give in that tennis aspect that like a lot of the other girls could give. It's like they can show up, work so hard, and that's all they need to do that day because they're just so talented, and that's just what they need to do is show up. I need to show up and like bring an energy and like an enthusiasm that was like above and beyond, because sometimes my tennis wouldn't speak for itself. And like, there was moments where I felt like, okay, if I can't serve super hard, or if I can't, put balls in the court at the level that they need, then I'm going to be, the reason that they want to be there at least. So like, that was kind of like what I made my goal is like, this was my purpose. Like, I'm not putting all my tennis, aside, because it's like my 5th year. Like I'm focusing on getting a job. I'm focusing on, my life outside of tennis. So I was like, in terms of tennis, I honestly put aside my goals as a player and I put my goals as like a person before that. And that was just kind of like, I want to be my best self. And sometimes like focusing on my serve for hours on end would not make me the best person. You know, like I would come out of that like disappointed. I would come out of that negative. So like I talked to coaches about it and I was like, look, like I really want to be there for this team. And as much as like, you know, I want to work on my game and I want you to help me work on my game as a player, I think that it's going to take away from me as a person. And I think like that's kind of what I focused on. Like my last 4 years, I was granted this opportunity to be here another year. And I think I'm going to use that towards being the best person I can be. And that's what I told coach. And they were just totally on board. And they were like, you know what, that's okay. If that's what you want to do, then we're going to do that and help you do that. And let us know what the best way to do that is. And that's kind of like where it kind of just started, where it's like, okay, I'm going to show up to practice and I don't have an excuse to not be happy because I'm not even working on anything that will make me upset, you know? So it's like looking for a job, but also like when I come on court, it was like, I'm going to bring energy. I'm going to bring enthusiasm. I'm going to be like, how can we get these girls to be the happiest they can be on the court?
The interviews afterwards, your coach mentioned that NC State had a system.
They did, yeah.
But you know, teaching is information transfer, coaching is human relationships. So at that point, yeah, you know everybody so well.
Yeah.
So that, you know, it's been interesting to learn more about the team bonding. But on the brain type, you know, you put two extroverts together, it's better to put an introvert, extrovert, even to which one plays in which court. But coming back to the press conference, a system to us is an organized plan. The GreatBase is a system of systems. But Brian Kalbas was very positive. He said NC State and you know, Brian's teams have won 3. His UNC players have just read this morning. Won the NCAA doubles title, not the team title, but you know, even individual champion, doubles champion. They've won 3 titles. But in this press conference, he says they have a system. They basically are very, very good doubles.
Right.
But that's what I mean by counter that is that and then also you and I go way back where the toughest thing about being a serve and volleyer in doubles is in junior tennis is to find another player who serves and volleys.
Right.
And you know the history of it. So the girls that enter NC State, and it's actually open domain. If people listen to our podcast, Dave Secker is well, we basically serve and come in on the second ball.
Right.
You know, we're going to come in and form that wall up at the net. And certainly that's what takes place in other sports is, you know, it's like football. You know, you send us the film of your last game, I'll send you the film of my last game, and then I'll study your film, but you'll study my film, and we'll play next week.
Right.
But you had a leadership role, and that again, all the thank yous. But you countered that with, and one thing that really must have helped out is the sets are a sprint. They're only to 6.
Yeah, they're only to 6.
I mean, and who made that rule up? I mean, it's not even divisible by 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, why don't you comment a little bit on the big doubles point and what happened?
Yeah, that was huge. Like, honestly, I didn't really know what was going to happen. I just knew that whatever happened last time was not happening again. And that was ultimately what coaches and the players were all on the same page about. And we were just like, we knew what they were going to do, which honestly seems like, oh, it's like, you know, common sense. Like, obviously, you know, they do the same thing. Like, what? So they always serve T, pinch middle, and they're coming forward as a team. Well, like, as, you know, as like girls that have been around tennis for so long, our girls are incredible players, like greatest, you know, I would say like greatest of all time, just in general as a team. And so I was like, we can do this. Like, you know, coaches were just like, let's just play a little bit more unpredictable. So we trained that week leading up to NCAAs, and just in general, like throughout after ACCs, we're gonna play and grow our skill set that we have that we know can beat them, or just any team that's coming forward pinching middle like that. Because like a lot of teams aspire to do that. It's just like, can they do it consistently? Well, for the most part, no. Like we try to do that. We try to, you know, pinch middle, poach, you know, do we serve T every time? No. But do we try to come in? Yes. But it's just like NC State has figured out how to do that consistently and effectively over and over and over again. And so they have formed this identity of doubles, which I was like, how nice is it that they have an identity that we can take? You know, we have an identity, I would say that our team has an identity that's like, where we get along and we're going to have fun and we're just together. So our identity was together. Can anyone take that from us? Absolutely not. Like that was my concept. And that was just what I kept telling the girls over and over is they have an identity we can take. We have an identity they can't take. And that's just in my head how I felt about it. It's my opinion. It's not, you know, that's not something that every coach will agree upon, but in my head, that's how we felt as a team. And so that's kind of like how we went about it, is like, how do we take that identity? How do we take that doubles point from them specifically? So I think to do that was that they play that system. They play that, serve, tee, pinch, middle. I mean, so we just played, we played to our strengths, and, it might have, with no risk, no reward. So I feel like we played a riskier doubles, but it obviously came out with like the results that we wanted. It was like we went line more. We took that first ball, like instead of taking it middle, we took it at them. We mixed in those lobs. We changed the pace. We tried to stagger them. Like as the girls were trying to come forward, we tried to, serve out, so that was just like, it was just a small piece, but it was, the big piece was the mindset, was that we have something they can't take. They have something we can take. And that was the mindset that I think helped us to win that day.
With, I don't know if you knew this before. I was, I had dinner with your parents and both brothers a month and a half ago or so with Diana Schneider, she's in a final, 250 final today. And Natalia Sorokin, who's been a guest on their podcast, very good friends with her mother. Natalia asked me, make a long story short, what should she do? And I said, well, she should go to NC State and learn to play from the service line in. But with that, so you lost in conference, you come back and you win, but you played them 3 times. It was the very first time she was at a pro tournament.
Yeah, she was.
And you had won 7-0.
Yeah.
And then, but we'll do.
But it was not a 7-0 match. Like, it was definitely a lot tougher. It was a long match.
And even the match that you won, there's so much drama because of college tennis, how it can unfold. But then beautiful Kerry Park that we talked about, they show up, go back to the doubles, but their player is there during conference, their number 1 player, Schneider, and she's, and this is compliment, animalistic on the court, but we'll put the copy of the documentary on Facebook of your championship run the team. This would be fun for people to look at. Let me ask you, we'll come back to the ACC and the crowd. Here's a question for you. You know the cartoon Mutt and Jeff?
No.
A little before your time. Well, you could also, listeners, look at just go to the UNC website and read the players' background. It's amazing. You get online, but you and Scotty are Mutt and Jeff. You're 5'1", she's 6'1".
She's my best friend.
But that crowd, they had a very hostile crowd. They out-recruited you. In other words, they had more red shirts at the conference. But I think from a documentary, you had more blue at the Nationals.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we knew. We were like, this is about to be a dogfight.
So many kids, I think with the UTR especially, there's so much anxiety in junior tennis. It's like Jose Garrett said about 12 and under tennis, somebody's got to win. And I mean, my son played at Ohio State, and he played in Final Fours, and you could be out there 3-all, your team wins, you move on, and then the audience, and even playing with the Tennis Channel there. Robin Anderson, we got to a semi. She's somebody who spent quite a bit of time with us. She was first as a freshman. Stella Sampras said to me, "Do you know what Robin asked me?" She said, "Are these matches being telecast?" People for the first time, this match is on Tennis Channel. There's so many things, but with so then you go up 1-0.
Yeah.
But you had momentum, but I think they probably went in. Probably is a weak word, but they went in going, we got a very good chance to win the doubles.
Yeah, they definitely did. I mean, I think that they go into every match with doubles point at ours, and singles will take care of it. But oh my gosh, like, it was just a weight off our shoulders. Which Coach is right. Like, he did speak on that a little bit. He said that I think we put our foot off the gas a little bit going into singles. And it's true. Like, I think we felt that relief. Like, did I ever feel like we were going to lose? Absolutely not, especially after we won doubles. But I did think that there was, like, granted, I'm not out there, I'm not competing, but I know if I was, my foot would be off the gas a little bit too. And that's just like something that we noticed. And I think the girls picked up on that, and we were like, we still are in this, like, this is still a match for us to take. And that was just like huge. Like, I think that the NC State girls did not give in. They did not. I mean, you take that match, like, maybe the first, you look at that match, or you drop in at, like, I don't know, hour 3, you don't know who won the doubles point at that point. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, that's kind of where we like with us getting off the gas a little bit. And also it was our fourth match of that tournament. Like it was hot. Like, you know, we had a night match, which was nice, but I mean, we were tired. I know the girls were tired. Like I know they were fighting. Like that wasn't even in question.
Oh, and the emotional stress.
Yeah. I mean, that can't even, that's the part where I struggle is like, you know, I'm leading a team of girls that I never will understand the stress that they're under. Like that's what I told them every day is like, I will never understand how you feel, but I can tell you how you look. I can tell you how it is perceived. I can tell you how it should be, but I can never feel that. And that was kind of where like, you know, having Scotty there as like my friend and like my backboard of like conversation was like really hard. And it made the hard things a lot easier because I was able to be like, hey, Scotty, like, is this something that's appropriate for me to say? Is this something that's, you know, going to be received well? And there was times where she's like, Soph, like, you know, we can't be doing a team dinner. Like these girls are toast, right? So like, and I think that was like what I needed to hear. And that's like, you know, so that made my life a lot easier. And that's what helped me to be the best leader that I could be, is that I wanted to be that teammate they could rely on, not that teammate they were afraid of or scared of, or like, you know, we got to do what Soph says. It's like, no, if I say something that you don't agree with, like I want someone to speak up and be like, yeah, maybe 6 or 7 of the girls think that, but I don't. Okay, let's talk about it. That's kind of like that's the relationship that I wanted to cultivate. And I think I did, and I think that it helped. So like my opinion wasn't the last opinion. It was always like an open discussion, and it was like, okay, these are the opinions, these are the thoughts. Now, how are we going to go about this?
Well, even if they weren't opinions, you gave them the out to come back and rethink it. But no, just listening to people listening to this will just know that two powerful things, you know, knowledge and communication that's coming out large and very clear by listening to you. With, I have to get this in, NCAA finals. Tim Adams, great guy, great coach. He works out. Met him through Dave Anderson's program out in Dallas. Been a guest in his house when I've gone out there to help players and coaches. Mm-hmm. And he's the one who told me that UNC is God's team.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, why is that? And he goes, look at the sky.
Yeah, what's the rhyme? Duke is puke, Wake is fake, NC State is the team we hate. There's the last part. I always mess it up, so I don't want to mess it up, but I know. It's like
Duke is puke.
Yeah, Wake is fake.
Wake
NC
is fake.
State is the team we hate. God's favorite color is Carolina blue. You're not going to heaven in a red canoe. I think that's the way it goes. But I have to look it up, but that's definitely, I think. But
yeah, I told people, and I've asked people who went to UNC, I said, you know why it's God's team? And a few people haven't been able to answer. But Tim Adams, look at the sky. So anyway, it was the NCAA finals, basketball, men, and I can't remember who the other team was, but UNC lost in the finals. And it was like the party starts, and you're fortunate to be very strong. You're part of a strong alumni. There was a lot of people from Dallas mm-hmm. that had a UNC connection, and they were at that party and going great. But then,
yeah.
So, but even NC State, I would say this is what an amazing run they've had from like you were there when Simon came in, and you know the program he inherited, and
no, they worked really hard.
They've climbed way up. Talk about working smart and working hard. But typically when people get there for the first time, they don't win. Mm-hmm. And even though it may have been with some different players, UNC had been there before.
Yeah, UNC had been there before. They'd made the Final Four before. Semifinals was not something that we weren't, familiar with. But definitely the finals felt different. It was like...
No, my son Connor, who coach said, Carlin Navarro, he's best when the knife is at the throat. So he was a good pressure player. I could be a doting dad and rattle off what his record was in the NCAA tournaments. But so many people with tennis minds have been in the game a long time. First time he had a chance to win a gold ball in singles, he was up 5-11 in the third.
Oh, wow.
And, but, I remember Mark Dixon, he was doing an internship with us, and he said, that's the best thing. Because, usually people lose. It's like a football team that's undefeated. they're better off to have lost. And if you study the history of football teams, they have, they're doing really well, but they have leading up to the playoffs, they have a loss. And with but we'll do that with the documentary. Put that out. It's an amazing story. But then it's a matter of now they got to regroup and try to do it again.
Yeah, and I think they will. I think. I mean, we have the talent to do it. We have always had the talent to do it. We have the depth. I think it's just a matter of the girls coming together and doing it together.
Those things. Here's one thought for private coaches in the junior development world: is it just keeps going and going.
Yeah.
The nice thing about college tennis is there's closure. There's playoffs. It's the end of the year, and then you can start again.
It's kind of crazy because like every last match of season, I've lost, and that was the only time in my 5 years where I could leave school. I mean, granted, I'm leaving forever, but I left school with a win, not a loss, because we would always get to NCAAs, we'd always get to the Final Four, we'd always end on a loss. So that was like huge.
Mike Carter, also been a guest on our podcast. He's been working at the USTA forever. What he says about college tennis, he's very animated, and he said college tennis is great. You can lose doubles, lose singles, but you can
win as a team.
Still win as a team. One last thing. A girl who's been in part of the GreatBase for a long time, Lannis Hamilton. I think one thing would be a positive to say is there's so many, but she recently was played doubles for the U.S. team that won the Billie Jean King Junior Fed Cup, and she signed to go to UNC. And I really think of brain trust. I think that obviously with Brian and the other coaches, you have their trust, you have their respect. But in many ways, it would be very good to connect you with Lannis Hamilton. And Cole Reeves is a person in Arkansas who really did the hard yards, has taught her how to play. I think 8 years old, 9 years old, came to work with me. And I know you looked at her in line. You could just tell right away.
Yeah,
I mean,
she was clean.
you said she hits like Matt Clore.
Yeah, she does.
So it's efficient. And, she's been taught to play all over the court. And this is not really a shot at the USTA. Let me ask you, Patrick Gibson, do you remember why I called him appetizer?
Because they would always offer that up as.
I asked you that today. Is that UNC, they have obviously a budget for athletics, and say, hey, you have appetizers. There's a lot of tennis players that don't even know what an appetizer is. So when players, and the USDA's had a revolving door, just like any organization, since 1987 when they entered player development. And I think you're better off when you can't afford an appetizer. A girl I coached, she ended up playing Maria Smith at Berkeley, so she's a good tennis player. Her mother passed away at a young age, but her mother was a world-class sprinter. Father was a world-class sprinter. I think the mother had more numbers in the record book, and he ended up being a football player. And she was with us off and on. At one time, she was with us for like 6 months, and we have it all on film. And Ray Ruffles, I called him up because the old Aussies, it's like he just grounded in honesty. I said, do me a favor, watch this tape and call me back. And he did. And he said, he agrees with everything on the tape. And he goes, hey, mate, but I'm leaving. I'm going back to Australia. I'm going to do a stint for a couple of years with Tennis Australia, then retire. But it would be good for you to connect with Lannis Hamilton and talk to her coaches. I know you're really busy. Let's come back to Lannis, but tell us what you're doing now. You're a graduate, you're in the real world.
Yeah, so I graduated in May. I had a month, and then I work as an analyst at First Citizens Bank in Charlotte. So they shipped me off to New York City for 6 or 7 weeks, and I was in an analyst development program, which was definitely a shock to my system. New York City was not for me, but I met a lot of people, and then I moved to Charlotte, and I'm here. I'm in Charlotte now. I've been here since September, and I've been liking it. I like my team that I have at work, and I'm just learning every day, so I feel like I'm just trying to absorb as much as I can. But
yeah, so with Lannis, I'll get you in touch. I mean, the family's based in Dallas. I could tell you story after story. We'll talk about the Australian Open on the next podcast. People stay the course. like say Ashton Kruger, she lost in the first round to the gal who was in the finals, a great athlete from China, Shang. And with a tabletop return, it's like at least you should be coming in. And she was with Anderson for a long time. I mean, all these podcasts. Rachel Rohrbacher, he's good at pickleball because of her grips, her swings, and she can go forward. Mm-hmm. And but I think it'd be good to that line of communication you have, but also the base of knowledge you have is to even though you're in Charlotte, it's not that far away from Raleigh or Chapel Hill. This would sound like an ego statement to a lot of people, but I've been doing this for 50 years, and I could be 1,000 miles away and have a better idea what's going on than people are right courtside. But I mean, Atlantis was just over playing the Australian Open. It's not based on one match. Start the course, stay the course, and a young kid, to go in and be, it's the USTA, the federation, and traveling all over the world. Is that you need to go back to the well. What got you there is what you were working on with Cole Reeves to begin with. But great to have you on the podcast. I mean, if we have a donor out there for the GreatBase Tennis, it's a nonprofit. $1 billion would be better than $1 million. But I'm not kidding when I say that Sophia, I mean, great to have her be the CEO of the GreatBase, because I remember when you were very young with those boys, you could be laughing with them, and then all of a sudden you could just snap and talk to those guys. And that's what a CEO has to do. That's what it sounds like. I guess that would be one last question with the way you talk to the girls on the team. It wasn't all hit and giggles. I mean, there was times where like, hey, it was all business.
I mean, definitely. Like, I think I've had to have a lot of hard conversations, but just like you said, like communication is like one of the most important things. And I think will get you really far, and not just tennis, but like life in general is communicating in a way that's effective. And I don't think I ever yelled at anyone, or I don't think I ever raised my voice. I don't even think I sat down with anyone and reprimanded or anything, because I don't think anyone deserves that at that level. It's like not about that. I think it's more about, hey, like what can I do better that can help you to do better? And that's kind of how I approach things, and how I feel like a lot of people should think about approaching things when they're leading a team, or even being as a part of a team, is just communicating in a way that people understand, because otherwise it's just mumbo jumbo that just gets lost and it's not effective.
Sophia Patel, thank you very much for being a guest on the GreatBase podcast. Oh, yes, let's do this. Tell us about, I'm sorry, I need to do this, the design of the ring. I mean, it's amazing. You could hold it up to the camera. Most people don't look at our podcast on the YouTube clip, but tell us a little bit about that ring.
So in history, Coach has always had, like, any championship we win, the seniors get to design the ring for that year. So we've always won indoors and for the most part ACCs, but we usually get one ring at the end of the year. And I was the only senior, so I was like, Coach, like, I don't know, like, am I supposed to be doing this? Like, this is a big ring, it's a big deal. And he was like, well, this is how we've done it. This is how we're going to do it. If you want to, like, do it, this is what we're doing. And so I got to partner with the athletic department and the media department and, coaches and some of the staff on the design team. And we just came together and, like, just, I don't know, design this. It was really fun. I met with some people at Barron. I think Barron Rings is where I got it from, and we just came together and came with a design. I know there's some options with gold, but I'm not a big fan of gold, so this is silver and blue. But
it's like with Roger Federer when he wore the white jacket with gold and the shoes with gold, and Andy Roddick said, "None of my family would wear that. None of my friends would wear that."
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan, but I know I've seen the gold rings, like Super Bowl, and like some of the other championship teams at Carolina have some gold rings, and they look super dope, like really cool. But I just really like the silver.
Two types of thought: reflective and reactive. It makes me think of being at Illinois in a room like this, and the coach Craig Tiley is with the players and the guys, and they have input on what the jerseys are going to look like, or I should say the warm-ups and this and that. And I look back and they go, "I was wrong." I go, "You guys just wear whatever they get for you. You guys shouldn't be in here worrying about that." But wrong. But no, it's fantastic. It's an amazing story. But I do think that this story should not be forgotten. And your young life and obviously the career you have ahead of you. And I think for people listening, to me, it's not about the tennis. Tennis is a vehicle, like you said, your dad, a microcosm of life. And I'm 100% confident that what you pulled off with the team, the experience you had, is that you'll be able to do that down the road.
As long as
times.
I have a team like I did at Carolina, I definitely will be able to.
Yeah, the dream team with, but even sometimes when it's not the dream team, with to turn people around, the turnaround, and you guys, your team, I shouldn't say guys, the gals, from the outside, wouldn't have really seen it as a turnaround because you've been right at the very top, but it's just that final step, and it was great that you're so much part of it. But again, thanks.
Thanks for having me, Coach Steve.
Adios. Wave goodbye to the camera.